This episode is sponsored by Launch. Are you an insurance agent that is tired of quoting business to try and find a better premium to win new deals? Are you looking for a way to differentiate and stand out from your competition? Well, look no further than Launch. Launch is an industry-leading software platform that gives you pre-built assessments that you can walk through with your prospect. Launch automatically calculates your prospect's risk score, and this allows you to show your prospect the areas you can fix to negotiate better premium and coverage with underwriters. Offer more value to your clients, turn missed sales into closed business, and most of all, become a better advisor to your clients. Visit getlaunch.io today to get more information on how you can use Launch to win more BORs starting right now. That's getlaunch.io to learn more.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Optimal Tech Stack Series 4, Getting Past the Premium. We're super excited about this series where we're going to be bringing all of the new technology that is tailored to risk advisors and folks in the industry that are being used by some of the most forward-thinking risk advisors and agency owners in the industry. And so we have conversations with those folks about how they've elevated their game using the latest InsurTech and just some of what they're using in their tech stack, in their firms, as well as beyond. And so enjoy the episode and look for more episodes in our Optimal Tech Stack series. All right, everybody. Well, welcome back to another episode of Getting Past the Premium with the Mr. Ryan Deeds. Glad to have you back, brother.
Thank you, man. Thank you. It's always fun to be with you guys.
Yeah, we've spent a few conversations recently now. We had the Chat GPT one, which was a really fun conversation, exploring, the uses for AI technology. And now we're back discussing the optimal tech stack for an independent agency, right? So for those that don't know you, give me your background, who you are real quick, and then we'll dive in.
Sure. I've been in the agency space 20 years, worked as CIO of two relatively large agencies, did a bunch of work with Assurance Global, helping them with data and other agencies with technology, did a bunch of private consulting, and now I work for Ennabl, where I'm helping agencies use data effectively. So, and that's kind of my passion, right? I love helping agencies figure out how to use technology and what technology to use and what are the common traps and pitfalls that I see. So I just think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's only a couple of them, right?
That's right. There's only a couple of them.
Well, and I will say, I don't know if we'll get into it because you're typically very humble about it, but if those of you have not looked up Ennabl yet and have not reached out to Ryan to learn how it could impact your agency, you should. It should be part of your tech stack. I'll just throw that out there that's what you need to be looking at when you're trying to visualize data. And I know Ryan will be probably super humble about it. So he won't always tell you how awesome it is, but it is very awesome. So that being said, Ryan, what's your perspective on how we should approach tech tools, whatever we're looking at implementing in an agency?
I think today the goal of most agencies is profitability, right? Profitability and scalability. Mm-hmm. And so, I think that some of the fundamental choices that are made early on help set the framework for that, right? Technology should really be goal-driven as well, right? As you look at technology and what you want your agency to be, I think you have to define, where you need to focus. You can't boil the ocean. You can't do everything at once. And I'm always going to say slow down a little bit because, you can make rash purchase decisions when it's not the right time. And I think it's very interesting because as you look at agencies' sizes and maturity levels, that really depends on what they need to bring in. You said, I've had conversations with folks that have called me and like, I want to buy Ennabl. I've been like, who are you? We're 4 employees. And I'm like, and we don't have an AMS and we don't have a CRM and we don't have process control. And you're like, whoa, slow down, brother, slow down. Like it's we are not a cheap product. I mean, we're an enterprise level product that does a lot of stuff. And so a lot of times people get caught up in the glitz. And I think we really need to change that and focus on what is the core problem that you're trying to solve and really have kind of strategic overlays. Like technology, in my opinion, should help a client get touched to a human as rapidly as they want to be. If they want to have a chatbot, great. If they want to dial into an IVR and work through it, great. If they want to talk to an account manager right now, how does technology help facilitate that frictionless connection from somebody who needs to know something to somebody that knows something, And so I think through that quite a bit.
Absolutely. That to me, I couldn't agree with you more on. We have to identify the problem first. It's super easy, especially right now with there's a ton of really cool tools out there that you mentioned, have the glitz and the glam that, can get us really excited and we want to buy it and, get it implemented and whatnot. But if we don't have that true core problem, we're not going to get the effectiveness out of it that we otherwise could. Right. And then, I've heard you talk in other circles about how you approach and I can't remember how you termed it, but your technology roadmap, or what did you used to call that? Where like you'd almost line up the technologies that you wanted to implement, but you had a roadmap as to when and how you were going to do them.
Well, I think it all depends on where you are, right? I mean, like, it's funny because if you take a scratch agency, I just came out, I'm trying to write whatever I can. I just need, premium and revenue through the door. That's a much different look than I'm a $6 million revenue agency that is trying to now move from mom and pop to more corporate and more profitable, right? Yeah. And there are these certain inflection points that I see in agencies. Typically, that's like a 1 million in revenue, 5 million in revenue, 15 million in revenue, 50 million in revenue, and 100 million in revenue. And each one of those inflection points, you have to do things much differently, or because you're trying to offset the need to increase staff as book growth happens, right? I mean, ultimately, that's one of the key things. How do we have great customer service? How do we have great process control, great carrier relationships, and not increase staff every time we write that? Also, how do we allocate staff to the most impactful and important things in their job? Again, we're not really talking about technology in that standpoint, right? We're talking about the goals that we lay out, because too often we get caught up in, oh God, I'm not sending out something to my clients. I've got to get a CRM tomorrow. Yeah. And really, it's more strategic and higher level than that. And so I think for each and every, if we're trying to figure out how do we gradiate this, I would kind of, if I'm an agency, I would ask myself kind of where do I sit on a revenue or premium level? And then what are the main issues that I'm facing when I wake up in the morning, right? If I wake up in the morning, I need to write business and you don't have anything in place, probably where you want to start with is some kind of marketing and outreach system, right? And a lot of people say, oh, get an AMS. Well, you can do that and you can get some cheap ones, easy links, and there's some ones that are low cost out there. But if you're trying to do one thing really great for the first or second year, you may be able to manage your stuff in Excel and in spreadsheets while you work on your client acquisition strategy to try to figure out how do I bring things through the door. Now, once I get things through the door, now I got to protect myself, make sure my account managers know how to use stuff. Where's my policy maintenance? I mean, at that point in time, that to me it's really important to have an AMS. And I would always say on the AMS, go higher than go lower, because what I mean by this is, if you had a continuum of agency management systems from very simple to very complex, I would start more on the complex and the cost side, actually, because that change that you have to make at those inflection points is a real pain in the butt.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're also trying to redefine process and control and learning. And so if you can afford the Cadillac and one piece of software, in my opinion, the AMS is kind of where to start with in that. Like to me, the difference between Pipedrive, HubSpot, and all those marketing, Salesforce, those are pretty, they're not hugely significant. The difference between Easy Links or, Now Certs versus Applied or AMS 360 is significant. And the retraining that you have to do there is significant. So I think you constantly have to be looking at the future and then kind of judging current state with that as you think through your roadmap,
That's key, as well as understanding even the strategy you want to implement to grow your agency. Or maybe you're just going to grow your agency to be a lifestyle agency to a certain point, and you don't need to take that next step to, whatever the next technology is. I think that's just so important. When you talk about even the marketing and lead gen softwares, maybe you're an agency that's going to just have producers as salespeople go out and knock on doors. Well, maybe you don't need a robust email marketing system, right? So it's identifying what you need for your agency to get started. But let's get specific here on kind of that start for an agency, right? So marketing, lead gen, a CRM to do those two things. And then maybe it's the same, maybe it's not, to do just your prospecting, suspect management, things like that. What's your thoughts?
I mean, to me, I'd want an all-in-one, right? I mean, and I've used a bunch of them, and what we're using today is HubSpot. And I mean, I feel like HubSpot is a system that has an inordinate amount of power, right? If I could train a producer on one producer in one agency on how to identify target client, right? Like you said, that's kind of the critical component. Like, who are you, a general agent writing everything and anything, which I would really say don't do that. But if that's the strategy, then like you said, maybe you don't need something hyper focused. But to me, getting that the HubSpot is the cream of the crop there. It does all the things you need it to do. And I always think about technology as, if I like a tool, after year 2, year 3, year 4, I should be compounding knowledge and compounding expertise on how to leverage that tool to drive the results that I want, instead of flipping and switching everything up. And I think HubSpot, in my opinion, really gives you a full gamut of tools to be able to do client acquisition, client outreach, prospecting, all of those different things. And it takes multiple years to really maximize the utilization of a tool like that,
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of times, go ahead.
The other ones that are out there are like Pipedrive and Salesforce. Obviously, we see a lot of those. But in my experience, HubSpot's the champ there.
Nice. Okay. So, and then in HubSpot would certainly be, probably on the more expensive side. Would that be?
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Yep. So then, look, maybe if you're smaller, not looking to spend as much, those Pipedrive solutions, are certainly a good.
Right. But the differential cost between a Pipedrive, I always think about the long-term ramifications of change, right? So again, if my strategy is I'm going to buy Pipedrive or another system, and at some point I'm going to go to HubSpot, I would say, man, maybe not. Maybe you just, wing it or use the free version of HubSpot until you can justify that cost. I personally wouldn't want to plan for a change regardless of my size. I mean, we're not talking about, $100,000 or even $30,000, right? We're talking about a spend that's under 20 grand typically, which is a lot. Yeah. But if you come in with a strategy, you know what you're going to do with this thing, you really are going to try to maximize its use. That's money that'll come back to you in multiples over the years. And again, that compounded knowledge with that one tool will differentiate you long-term than if you're a Pipedrive user, a HubSpot user, or a Salesforce user. Because, probably in my life, I've had more CEOs come up to me and be like, I've tried 5 CRMs, none of them worked, right? And my answer is like, yeah. And they're like, well, what's the perfect one? There isn't, right? It's how are you using it? How do you incentivize your producers? How do you get buy-in? Are there penalties for non-utilization? All those things to be thought about before you bring tech in, because oftentimes the problem that we solve with tech, we're trying to solve that problem and put technology in, and then people always blame the tech for causing issues when it's really the process, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. The technology is the same to everybody, right? It's how you use it, how you implement it.
Yeah,
it's agnostic. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
The process in which you have to go through to understand where tech fits in and how you're going to use it. We think about, workflows and automations and whatnot. I mean, you can't possibly start to qualify a particular piece of tech without truly understanding how in depth and what you want those processes and automations to do,
Well, and that's generally why I tell people, like, go do this without tech in place, right? Yeah. So if an agency that's never used a CRM comes to me and says, we want a CRM, I'm like, okay, great. Why don't you do what you want in Excel first? To get your producers to fill out an Excel sheet, get your producers to do these things first, you're going to then out your cultural inability or ability to adhere to that. At that point, you can address those. Then you can go bring the solution in, and you're not fighting 2 battles at one time. And so I'm always like, go low tech first for the process, then bring tech in to make that process more efficient. That's generally how I would tell people, for all things.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Now, you had, when we were talking before, you had brought up a good point, how you look at CRMs about, giving producers time back and supporting them versus that accountability tool. Maybe you just expand on that a little bit, because I do think that's a key delineation.
It is. I mean, when you think about what holds, almost tons of agencies have CRMs, and if you ask them how many of them use it well, a lot of them will say not many. And I think oftentimes the CRM, in my opinion, the best CRM is there to help that producer do more with less time, touch more prospects with more relevant information to create relationships faster, and to really be beneficial to the producer. Oftentimes, it's not used in that mechanism. It's used to justify producers' behavior to determine if that producer is doing the right things that will ultimately drive a result, right? And so, and if that's the case, the producer knows immediately that that's the problem. And if that's the problem, then your utilization and buy-in on that is going to be much less, right? You're going to have a lot of gamification. You're going to have a lot of just people putting in bare bones of information because it's not helping them. So I think it really has to be focused on how much it's providing back to the producer. And you articulate that as you're identify the pain points. What's holding your producers back today? What are the main issues? Because again, don't go buy technology just because you need to have a list of 5 or 6 problems that tech is going to solve. That way, when you evaluate the software that you're looking at, the solution that you're looking at, you can bounce it off those problems and say, okay, this solves 4 of these. This other solution solves 5 of these, right? Yep. If you don't have your problem set, don't look at freaking technology because it's not going to work. We get too caught up in this guy over there is doing this and we heard great things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Totally.
Well, it takes a step back too to 150,000 feet to understand what some of those problems are. I can't help but to think, going down this path of starting a new agency, what's your number one problem before anything else?
That's right.
Well, you don't have a client. So how are you going to go get a client and do that effectively and then win?
And how do you have markets? Markets and clients are the 2 things that you need, right? And I mean, but I will tell you this, that if you come to a market with a strategy and say, hey, I'm targeting this kind of business, we're using this technology, this is how much we have in our area, this is how we're going to bring those on, that carrier is going to be a hell of a lot more receptive to working with you than if you're like, yeah, I heard you write good coverage, And so again, as you articulate those core problems that you have, what technology is going to go and alleviate those? But it's funny how few times I see the problems in front of a solution, right? Like, hey, these are the 5 problems that we need to solve,
Mm-hmm. Totally. So, okay, that's, marketing, prospect generation. Let's talk about then getting into, I'm going to probably ask 2 in 1 here, but kind of the, AMS that you typically see. Maybe let's talk through that. And then, there's a lot of tools out there now for the underwriting piece, the gathering of information, applications, things like that really dovetails into the AMS. So curious to get your thoughts on, what you've seen out there from a tech perspective that could help solve some of those problems.
So let's just go through AMSs first, right? I think we've got the 2 big vendors that are on the 2 major vendors. We got Vertafore and we have Applied, right? So, and those guys have really 3 products between them, right? They have Applied, or actually 4. Applied Epic is kind of their premier product. Applied also has Easy Links, which is really geared to smaller agencies, right? Vertafore has Sajita, which is, very large enterprise level, and then AMS 360, which is flexible between all things. And so those 4 options are kind of your standard top tier options, Now, then you have these new kind of folks that are coming in, Salesforce based, be that Varuna or Novadeus.
Novadeus,
right?
Yeah.
Right. Those are these kind of newcomers that are making inroads. Now, I think that if the listener is familiar with the tech canary thing that happened, that creates quite a bit of reticence for really embedded agencies, more tenured agencies, to move to those technologies because of that acquisition. But those are out there and you can absolutely explore those. And then you have some of the freer ones that are out there, or more cheap ones, like a Hawksoft or a NowCerts, that you can just kind of plug in to start using, as you need it. I think that, once you kind of understand that dynamic with the Vertafore and Applied, those other 2, then you can kind of say, okay, what do we need this thing to do for us today? And if we grow to this, so if we're on a growth projection of X, Y, and Z, at what point will we need to get something more robust? And if that's within 3 or 4 years, I would just say, look, make the investment to get the bigger system, the more complex system in place that will help drive some of that. And also Better Agency is another one that's coming out with an AMS, right? They're a scrappy fighter that's out there. And so I think that we have a lot of options out there. But you got to think about, if I'm PL today and I'm going to drive into CL long term or EB, how many times am I going to have to change this system over? What's that going to do my process control? What's that going to open up on E&O? How much retraining cost? And the strategic mind can kind of take that into consideration as they make those decisions. And I think you want an AMS for core reasons of policy management, what's coming up for renewal, right? Documentation. This person declined flood. I need to make sure I have that record. Note taking. We had these conversations, activity tracking. They pulled these kind of certs, because as you grow, you're able to kind of analyze those workflows, those metrics to determine productivity. And I say that lightly because it's a scary thing, but you can at least understand what's being done in the system. And those more robust systems give you a lot more flexibility to create workflows and different items and things that are there, if that makes sense.
Totally. How about the applications, underwriting, that piece?
So let's talk about the problem. I mean, the problem is today, if you're not using a tool like that today, so I'm a producer going after a risk. I get my little Accord form and we go out to the desk and I'm asking them questions and I'm writing it down and I miss a few things. I come back, my handwriting's crappy. I give it to marketing. Marketing says, I can't read this stuff. Now there's this tense relationship. I got to go back to the client 4 times. It's a whole mess, right? And we've seen that happen quite a few times, right? Producers will get ticked off at marketing. Marketing will get ticked off at producers. And, so then you say, okay, well, the problem is how do we have a solution that easily collects data from the account manager, producer, client, and then gets that easily to marketing and then gets that over to the carrier most effectively? That's the problem that we would try to solve with this, right? So with that problem in mind, we have a glut of solutions that are out there, right? Probably the big boy on the block is Indio, because it's embedded kind of into Applied's workflow. And when you think about what that technology looked like, it's literally an electronic form that you fill out a little bit, your AM fills out a little bit, you send it to your client, they fill out a little bit, then it goes to marketing, right? And it's all digital and all tracked and all that stuff. So it makes the consumer experience much more effective. It kind of elevates your ability to say, I'm a digital agency and I'm there with the customer experience. The tools that are out in the market today, the first 4 that I think about, are Indio, Broker Buddha, Wonderwrite, and then there's one called Xylo, which is more PL focused. Again, I've seen more poor implementations of this technology where I've got one department using it or 3 people on a department using it. Very rarely do I see an agency have a systemic installation and everybody's on the same page with how to use that technology. And so as you analyze that end result that you want to get, don't minimize the work needed operationally to get there, because vendors always are like, oh no, it's no work for you. It's easy button. It's nothing is easy. Change management in an organization is tough, and it's because everybody's worried about getting in trouble and dropping the ball and they don't want to. And so, but those are the solutions that are out there. That's the problem that it solves. And that's kind of the folks that I would talk to. I mean, to me, I love Wonderwrite. I love Peter.
Yeah, he's been on the podcast several times.
Yeah, man. He's brilliant. And he has a great heart. And I think he really understands the space. So they're small enough to still do a lot of cool custom stuff and have some flexibility. And I dig that company. Obviously, I was a big fan of Indio when they were early on. And I don't hate on any of these guys. Again, the agency that trains on this stuff I don't care what you buy. You could buy a form site and train on it really well and be more effective than some fancy ass solution.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah. And Peter's coming back on for this tech stack series too. So we'll see how he answers that question. I'll be curious.
Well, I'm curious to your guys. So another one that I think about a lot on the customer side is payment solutions.
Yeah.
We're seeing a ton of payment solutions, right? And again, let's articulate the problem. Right. The problem is I'm an agency. I want to collect money from my client, right? If we look 10 years back, we sure as hell didn't want to handle credit card information, right? That was something that the agencies tried to stay away from. At one of the firms I was at, we would accept cash, but we actually got, one of our account managers embezzled about $200,000 over 2 years. It was,
Whoa.
yeah.
Jeez.
She was taking care. Yeah. And so, yeah, and that was like in 2007, 2008, and it was cash and checks and all this stuff. And so, somebody has to come into the office, or I got to mail it. It's slow to get there. The customer doesn't want to deal with that stuff. Enter payment solutions, right? So now, again, this is really customer experience facing, right? And protects us from having to collect that. And we've seen a ton of solutions on the market, right? The big boy on the block is ePay policy, right? Mm-hmm. They are huge, but I'm very interested in what Applied Pay is doing, right? Because now Applied Pay is a brand new kind of thing that they're bringing out that I think is going to really be awesome there. And you have like Ascend obviously does stuff like that. They do a payment processing, and they also bake in premium financing to that. And so depending on the need of your agency, but I think that's kind of a critical component that's small, easy to implement, and easy to get in place, but really does help both customer and agency pretty effectively.
That one's super intriguing to me to see where it goes, because our industry for many facets is very reliant upon insurance carriers. We as the agency or broker, sometimes don't have control over that. We don't have control over direct bill, right? A lot of times we don't even know that our client hasn't paid their bill and is about to cancel until 2 days before. And, all the different stuff that goes into that. And I'm just curious to see how we can use some of those tools to potentially make it easy for us to better manage client payments in-house and avoid the restrictions that direct bill puts on it. Direct bill is a great thing. Obviously, we don't all have to have accounting teams that are managing, our client billing and whatnot. But a lot of times it can also cause some stress with the client experience, and that we can't control. And so I'm just curious to see how firms start to use some of those tools, and outside of the traditional application of excess and surplus lines and things like that, where you've had to use payment financing and things like that for a long time, which makes total sense in there. And you mentioned Ascend, they're doing some awesome stuff.
Well, I think there's actually, like, when you think about this, so in Florida, agents, especially between like 2004 and 2010, we had agencies with massive trust issues, right? From the standpoint of their trust ratio being upside down, right? Where they were using carrier money to pay operational cost, and then like paying, down the road, paying carrier with money they should never touch. And so some of those solutions help keep you out of those problems. Now, some agencies will actually try to take advantage of that float, but there's legal ramifications for that, right? And you can get yourself into a whole lot of trouble when you do that. And so, as you analyze, is that something that you're concerned about as an agency? I want to keep myself okay in this space. Well, great. Well, this solution doesn't help with that. That solution does, right? So I think, again, there's as you articulate the problem set, that will help you flush out what you need out of the solution. And for me, I kind of sounds silly, but I'm not a guy that says like, why should I get this? I'm more of a guy that says, why not? Like, I have a good solution set. Here's 5 things that I needed to do. This thing comes in, it does all those 5. Why wouldn't I go with that? Right. I'm going to spend.
Or why do I change? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly correct. Why would I spend another year analyzing all these nuances of a technology, the difference of a technology, when that one right there solves the 5 core problems that I have, and so that, I think, but it comes back to that problem determination, right? What is the issue that you're trying to solve?
Absolutely.
Agreed.
So, that covers a lot of ground there. I'm curious then, see how you do answer this question. We've got our AMS set up, we've got our CRM set up. There's a lot of data that runs through those systems. Let's talk about document management before we go anywhere else, because document management would be the next step, right? I got an AMS, I got my CRM, right?
So now the problem is I've got so many things floating back and forth into the nether and here, right? And so how do I make sure the problem again? I have a ton of information, a ton of paperwork that I need to figure out how to access rapidly to have everybody get access, everybody who needs to have access to that, have access to that in an organized fashion, right? Mm-hmm. Old school way was we would T-file it, right? We would take a scanner, we would put June 20th.
I remember the old T-files. Oh yeah,
man. You'd have a January 21st file in there with everything that was scanned in. So then you'd go through that. Well, that was the iteration after filing cabinets, right? Filing cabinets before that, then T-file. And so they said, well, gosh, this takes forever. Multiple people can't access, we don't have any metadata wrapped around this, so you can't query it. Solution? Document management system, right? So a document management system is something you upload your documents to. Oftentimes they have front end scanning. So your mailroom actually scans the documents in, gets delivered electronically to your staff. They can then handle and process that within the document management solution and use that. And to me, that document management solution is one of the largest efficiency builders in our environment, right? Once you get past AMS, CRM, but from an efficiency standpoint, that document management thing helps so much. And again, there's multiple solutions out there. I mean, the biggest one is applied as something built in, a little something baked in. It's not great, but you have WorkSmart, ImageWrite from Vertafore, that they used to be CBD Doc, and actually a lot of those have now kind of died out. There used to be a bunch of competitors in the insurance space, but there's only a couple now. But the one that I used that I loved the most was called Highland OnBase, and we use that at Linear Upshaw. And man, I mean, it was a premier solution, but the flexibility and the way the staff liked it and how we could integrate it into the rest of our technology was very significant. But I think document management is another one that you have to have an awareness of.
This is something we're talking about on that. How about email management? We in Epic, that's what we use. We manually attach, all client correspondence via email to the system. In other industries and other sides of our business, that's all done automatically through an email, management or archiving system. Have you seen anything from that perspective that can make that process more automated?
Yeah, I mean, but okay. So what we did and again, there's this thing that we used to do called a data fingerprint, right? So we'd have a data fingerprint for each role in the organization. You have habitational account managers. They look like this many calls, this many documents that are put in document managers, this many emails, this many activities in the system, whatever. And, a habitational account manager looks different than a personal lines account manager, looks different than a, select accounts account manager, right? What we saw across the board when we did our soul sucking task thing was they hated attaching things in the system. It just was a pain in the ass, and we were attaching everything in the system. We didn't have an email archiver at the time, but we did have this data fingerprint. So what we knew was everybody hated to do that. How do we minimize that? Well, what if we could just say these are the 4 critical document types that have to be put into document management, right? These 4 or 5 that we've strategically decided. The rest will be picked up by the archiver that we can then go and reference when we need it. We save a ton of front time work for the account managers and then a manager would access the archive when needed, which was relatively rare, right? This is not something that would happen every day. So you ended up saving a ton of time. And because we had the data fingerprint, what we saw was a reduction in the amount of documents that were being attached to the system. We could quantify that as success after 6 months and saying, man, we saw a 24% reduction in the amount of documents being attached with no downtick in our productivity, with no downtick in E&O or protection, because Archive was capturing each and every email that we could retrieve if we were legally compelled to or if we needed to, right? Mm-hmm. And so
what tools were you using from an archive perspective?
Well, we were using Barracuda, but like today, I think everything like Office 365 has all that built in, right? There's probably right now, you probably have every one of your emails archived already that is retrievable by your team. And if not, I think it's like something you just turn on inside of Outlook, inside of your AMS, your Office 365 tenant. But more importantly than that is the discussion about what gets attached and what are the document types that do get attached.
Yeah, that's the tricky part.
And what we found, though, was because we defined that tightly, people were able to access and find things way easier, a year or two down the road with the things that were put into the AMS because they weren't having to do it 50 times a day.
It's true. That is another factor in terms of cost and whatnot, is not only attaching, but then scrolling through the mountains of attachments on a particular account over a short period of time.
Yeah. And so I mean, that was kind of how we handled that. And it wasn't nearly as much of we needed the archiver to have the technology there to be able to create the process to scale that process down to be more effective. Right. But the problem is they hated, from our soul sucking task list, they hated having to attach everything in the system and then retrieve it.
Well, so we could go deep on this because I have several further questions maybe. We could consider how to go deeper on that one, because there's the documents are one thing. It's just that what I would have a question on is the correspondence between me and the client about their renewal or whatever. How do we make the determination that gets attached or archived, type of thing?
Well, right now,
how do we access the archive if I don't attach something and need to or whatever?
Well, in a lot of cases, like for us, we had that was more document based than email based. Now, obviously, they would classify, hey, a declination and email would get attached, right? But everybody had access to their archive. It was just another tab in Outlook, so they could go in and look at any point in time. The manager then could see the whole damn department. So Betty's gone. We need to get into her email. Let's take a look what's going on. Boom, there it is. And the search mechanisms and all that were very, very effective. And I'm almost positive you guys use Office 365. You have that tool, that capability today to go through.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think that's a big one for agencies to solve. I think it's one that agencies don't look at enough because they feel like it's just, one of those things that just is what it is, and so we just attach emails and documents, and that's what we have to do. We got to protect ourselves from an E&O perspective. And, a lot of things hide behind that E&O umbrella, which is very, very important. Don't get me wrong, but like anything else, we need to take a deeper look at it and say, well, is me asking this client for a meeting on Friday really important enough to spend the 5 minutes attaching it into the system?
Right. Exactly.
Again, I don't know. But it's asking that question, I think, is super important.
Well, intentionality, being intentional about it. I mean, the problem is, like you said, oftentimes you don't know what you don't know. And I just feel bad for agency owners and principals today, because, as I look at LinkedIn and there's so much noise and there's so much stuff out there to pay attention to. And, oh my God, if you don't do this, premiums are reduced, all this crap. How, as an insurance agency principal, are you supposed to determine what is legitimate and what is not? How do it's so freaking hard. You have all these damn gurus that are out there that and you can talk generally about anything, but until you have a multi-hour meeting with an agency and understand how they operate, I think advice is it's kind of BS, right? If I don't know your agency, how can I give you advice on anything?
Yeah, it's very true. All right, so let's get to then. We've got a whole bunch of data flowing through these systems, right? How do we access? How do we get, visuals into that data? How do we use that data? Ennabl, and but I think I'll preface this by saying, I think the most important. Everybody wants data. It seems like that's like the just magic word right now is let's get data. We just need data. It'll solve all the problems. It's not the
bullshit.
Data.
It's a bunch of it is.
It is.
It drives me nuts because
you and I've had this conversation at length, right? It's what the data can tell you, how you're going to use it, what problem again does it solve, et cetera. So
are you willing to put in the operational pain to get your data right? I mean, because ultimately what everybody wants is when they say data, what they actually mean is we want actionable information that we can base decisions on and track results with. Now, that's a maturity level from, data to that statement right there, right? But there is a ton of the kind of master data management strategies. So if you want to leverage data, what you have to do is figure out, like you said, what are the problems that I want to solve? I want to know where I'm growing. I want to know what industries I'm serving. I want to know what I'm writing. So then you've got to identify in the system, what are the fields that have to be right and that we're going to create process and control over to be correct. And at that point in time, executives are like, yeah, it's fine. We're just going to use data, right? We see it all the time. And so It's a much better conversation, I think, to say, are the problems that you have that you think you're going to solve with data enough for you to allocate a significant, a portion of your resources to making that right. And generally that inflection point doesn't happen until you hit like 20 million in revenue, 30 million in revenue, where you're really able to net some gain out of it, right? Like smaller agencies, it's so hard to keep some of that stuff straight. But that's the problem coming in. And then again, that's one of the reasons Ennabl is so good, is because we do try to shore up a lot of that data quality stuff for agencies, right? But I think if you think about the result of data, which are the visualizations, and really that's not even the result, that's the byproduct. The result should be driving revenue, increasing efficiencies, decreasing employee loss. Tie what you want to something and then back into what you need to be entered correctly. So that intermediary step, which is the visualizations, which is where data always fails. Because if Ryan goes and looks at freaking a dashboard that I built and he knows that data is wrong, almost everything else is invalidated past that, right? It's like, oh, screw this. I'm going back to my old ways. I'm doing it the way that I know what truth is. And so unless you spend the time on, and everybody wants to build pretty graphs. I mean, that's the thing. Like, you see all these Power BI guys that are like, here's beautiful graphs. And I'm like, I don't care, because if the data quality, the agency hasn't prioritized data quality, then they're not even putting the work or the effort in to get the change that they want at the end of the road.
Yeah. Totally. So we've done the data quality. Talk through how you would evaluate maybe some of those tools out there. You mentioned Power BI. Obviously, we've talked about Ennabl, there's SQL, there's Python, there's all the different stuff. But
yeah, I mean, I think Power BI is probably the easiest for somebody just to step up. If so, and that's that that means that you have an AMS or a system that allows you to have access to the data, right? And typically the data that you're accessing is in a SQL server, right? I mean, generally that's how it is. So once you have a SQL server with your data in it, and for Epic, that would be the BDE, AMS 360 is natively SQL. Sajita has a couple different tools to be able to do that, us being one of those. Now you can attach these visualization tools, be that Power BI, Excel, Tableau, UltraX, whatever, to that. And now you can say, okay, I'd like to see what was our booked revenue for 2022 versus 2021, right? What was my year to date? What is my year to date now versus year to date last year? And you can kind of visualize that. Depending on your data quality, you can start getting into some of the reasons. Hey, we lost a bunch of accounts last year. Okay, why? We lost 48% of those because of M&A. 13% of those because we got beat on price, 20% because we didn't have the market changed, right? I mean, but if you didn't know that, everything becomes, oh, we're going to go after all these clients that we lost. No, you're not going to go after the M&A stuff. If you had service issues, you might try to repair that. But the better granularity that you have, but it's an onion. So it doesn't really happen all at once because you can't see the value of it as you're putting that in. So, I mean, data is a journey, man. It is not a one and done. Like every system that you use to some extent is a journey, but data is a totally different beast because you really have to culturally set up your organization to say, account manager, if you think about data and how it drives results, let an account manager or producer see where they were January 1 and see where they are now and tell them why. You wrote 15 new accounts, you lost 7, 6 got moved out of your book, 4 got moved into your book of business. Here's where you stand. Right. Because then what that gives Ryan and you ability to talk to a producer about is, hey, I'm an $800,000 producer. You're like, well, shit, half of your book was originated by this guy that's no longer with us. You inherited it. So really you're a $400,000 producer, but we're also in a place where the rates are super high. So you're it gives you these key discussion points to help drive that. But it all comes from those problem determinations, what you want to use it for. And as you use data, you just drill down and down and down and down. I think it has to be action driven, though. What do you want to do with it? Because otherwise you just get lost in a bunch of numbers.
No, for sure.
But yeah, Power BI, Tableau, Excel. I mean, I think Excel is so powerful, right? You can, like with Ennabl, we have our data warehouse. You can plug Excel directly into that. And now you can create all your reports on Excel that leverages it, that's updated every night, right? I mean, if so, most CFOs know Excel really well, and they can do that, and they have access to all the things. And so I think Power BI is the one that's the most ubiquitous out there because of its addition to Office 365 and the low cost of startup.
Yeah. Awesome. What did we not cover in that? I mean, we hit the gamut there, but what did we miss?
I mean, for me, being in the game for 20 years, man, and trying to figure out how to get account managers and people to actually use tech, I hammer on this all the time. And so I kind of feel like I'm a broken record, but don't buy tech if you're not going to have, if your tech solution costs you $10,000, allocate 10%, 15% of that every year to training on that tech, additional to whatever else the vendor offers. We do all this CE for our folks. Our account managers were always taking CE, always doing continual ed on insurance stuff. And then they'd get like one class on the AMS and they'd be taught, yeah, right. And they'd be taught by the person sitting next to them that had their own workflows that were 7 versions back. Right. And so we're not updating that. And the commitment to training has to be there if you're going to go down this tech path. And if it's not, then don't go down the tech path. Just do the stuff with paper. And you got to train your people on how to use this stuff and what it means to your agency. And so that's my biggest takeaway, man. I think problem determination before you buy a solution gives you the ability to figure out if it fits it. Training the staff on making sure that you are committed to training. And then if you're going down the data road, are you willing to do the work? I mean, those are the 3 kind of big ticket items that I would take away from this.
Awesome. That was good, man. I hope, that's a good kickoff to our optimal tech stack series here, because I think it lays a lot of the foundational thought process and work that agency owners and leaders should be thinking about as they evaluate different technology. And make no mistake, there's only going to be more opportunities moving forward to bring tech into your firms, and having a solid, technology and data strategy will, propel you significantly in being able to make those decisions effectively. So appreciate you taking the time, man. It's always great. Always good to see you and talk. And so we will, I'm sure, see you soon at some point.
No doubt about it. It's nice seeing you guys twice in a week. So good time. Good time.
Three times, dude. 3 times.
I know. And then I'm meeting with Cork next week, right? So
there you go. All right. Cool, man.
All right. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to Getting Past the Premium. We are excited to continue breaking down barriers and finding solutions together. If you would like to reach out regarding anything you heard in today's episode, find links and contact info in the description. Until next time, have a great day, and let's continue getting past the premium.